Hi and welcome to another tutorial from Blender Insight, and this time it will be this pattern since one of my Facebook members asked how you can scatter circles around like this. So let's go right into it. So first of all we need some type of scale, so Shift A, converter, vector math, and here we can put in the scale. But normally I add some fraction here, but I will not do that this time because we need some space for these to move. So we need some area that is a little bit bigger than 0 to 1. So instead I will use a modular here. So I take this one, press Shift D and change it into a modular. So then I can change the value here. And I think we should have it a little bit flexible, so I will add an input here. So Shift A, input value, and we'll start with like 2 or something like that. And then I need to connect it, so we use a combine. So Shift A, converter, and a combine X, Y, Z, and this will be for the X and Y. So we put it in here to the modular. And we can have some scale. So let's say that we take scale of 8 for instance. So if I now take this to the surface here, you can see that we get 4 tiles times 4 tiles instead of 8, because we are using value 2 of the modular. So that means that this is from 0 to 2, 0 to 2, 0 to 2, and 0 to 2, and then we have used all the 8 in the scale here, so it's always half since we have 2 here. We can change these things later on, but right now we just keep it as it is, so we get some space here. And now we need to transform it, so we do normal subtract and multiply here. So Shift D and do a subtract, and Shift D to do a multiply. But now we should have multiply by 2, but we should not have a subtract of 0.5. We should have half of this value instead. So we take this and just divide it by 2 and connect it to the subtract. So we can take one of these, so Shift D, change it into a divide, and put that from a combine and put 2 here. So we get half that value and put it in here. And now you can see that we get the center part here, which is what we wanted. So now we can add some circle here. So Shift A, then go to converter, vector math again, and we change this into length. And when we change it into length, we get these dots here, but there are now more distance between them. And to make the dots into circles, we subtract here. So Shift A, converter math, and we change this to the bottom part, and we change this to 1, and we change it to subtract. Subtract. So now we have got the circles, and now it's time to make them move around, but also change in size here. So changing of the size we can do here in different ways, but we need to know when to change it. So what we should do is that we can take the information that and just move this a bit first, the information that we have here, and then we take that to the scale and take the floor value out of it, and you will see what happens then. So I just copy this one, Shift D, put it in here, and we can change this to floor. So let's see if we can find floor here. Should be here. There we have it. Okay, so if I just take the floor from the scale and take that out to the material output, you can see here that we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But we are working with only 1, 2, 3, 4. So I would like this to be only 4 tiles on the floor as well, so we don't get like a half of tile here. So then I take the value that I have down here and do the same here. So I take this divide here, Shift D, and put it here, and now I can take this value to here and go to the surface here. No, not from the divide, directly from this one. So now when we take it from here, we get it exactly as 4, since we have now 4. If I change this to 3, then you can see I get 3 tiles here, and so on. I need, of course, 9 here in that case to really get 3 tiles. But you see that the divide that I use together with the floor makes the same amount of the tiles that the module do now. So by using this combination here, where we have a divide after the scale that we put into the value that we have here, we get the correct floor that we then can use to create some type of random value. So now I go back to 2 here, and we can put this to 10 or something like that. And now we need some random value, and we can use the white texture noise. So Shift A, go to texture and white, no, not this one. See if I can find my keys today. Shift A, go to texture and white noise texture. Now we have it. So we can have 2D, put that in, and now I can use this to the subtract here and take that out here. And you can see I now get different sizes of this, and I also have some space that I can move it in the X and Y direction. So that will be the next step that we should do. So to move it in the X and Y direction, we need to put something in here so we can add. And this is like finished, so we don't use that, but we need something between the scale and a modular, and that is an add. So I press Shift D, take that out here and change it to an add. So if I now change this one, you can see it moves in the X direction, but you cannot move it more than 0.5. After that it starts to cut, but you can also move it to negative 0.5. So we now have some movement space that we can use, and we have some movement space that we can use up and down. So now it's only 2 in the same way as we use the white noise texture up here to make some white noise texture for the X direction and for the Y direction. So then we can use the same way as we did up here. So every time we get the floor here, we then get a new tile here, and we can then use white noise texture. So I can just copy this white noise texture up here, Shift D, and do it 1 time and 2 times. So I have one for the X direction and I have one for the Y direction. Now I only need to combine something here, but if I use the same value on the size and on the X direction and on the Y direction as an input, we also get the same value as an output. So we need to be able to change that in some way. So we can do like this, that we take and do a combine. So Shift A and then go to converter, combine XYZ, put that in here. But instead of 2D, we change this to 3D, because that means that we used X, Y, and the Z value here. And we can do the same here. So just press Shift D and put it here and change this to 3D. And now what we can put in here is a separation of the floor value on the X and Y, and on the Z we can then put in something manual. So I will just move this first. So we have some space. So now we have some space here, and then I can go up here and do a separate. So separate X, Y, Z. So now we have that, and we can use that for the noise here as well. So Shift A, converter, and here we use a combine, so we can do exactly as we did down below. And then we just use the X and we use the Y, and now I can change this if I now change this to 3D. So then we can see I change the sizes here depending on what I put in the Z direction. So I can do the same down here. So now I have separated the X and Y from the floor. So I can just put it in on this one and also on the one that is below. But I put then different values on the Z here, and look that these are on 3D. And now it's just for me to combine these values into the add that we put in previously. So I move this even further away like this. So we get some room here, and then I put in a combine, and we already have a combine here. So I can just take that one, Shift D, put it in here, and put it to the below value of the add. And now it's just for me to put in the X value here and the Y value here. But now you can see it gets like cut here, and that is because it's then bigger than 0.5, because this is between 0 and 1 as a value that we get out. So we need to subtract with 0.5 on each of these. So I just press Shift A, converter math, put that in here, and then subtract 0.5, and I do the same with the Y direction. So now we have it in here, and we can change how they should be scattered by changing the Z value, and the same goes for the size here, that we can change it. And we can also do like this, that we can increase the size between the circles here, and then just increase the scale to get more in here. So then we can play with everything. And of course, when this increases, you could then add some multiply here, because now these are so small that we could then be building a little bit more difference between them. So we can put in a multiply here, that then, and you can see it can get over 2 now, and it still does not collide here. So it's up to, I can see 4 around that we can move in this direction, and the same with this. So now we can get really big changes here. So we can control this as well with the value that we have in here. And the easiest is just to take this value and subtract. So take that value and subtract with 1, which is one of these UV for the size for the circle here. So if we put that into our multiply here and to our multiply here, we still have no collisions here. Everything works fine. So now we can just increase the size or decrease it, but never below 1. So if you go below 1, you get then some cut edges. But everything from 1 and then spread up here will work fine. So here you can do some type of circles, as I do now. You can change the pattern if you want to. You can do star, sky, or whatever, because everything that you put after this and then subtract with this will then be the pattern that you put out here. So let's say that I will do squares instead. Then I just take and do a separate here, and I put in a maximum, Shift A, converter math, maximum, and I take this to the subtract here. So then we have this, and then I of course need some absolute here since we are doing tiles. So I just put that in first here as well. So an absolute. And now everything is squared, and if I put in smooth maximum, then I can get these smooth corners as well. And if I do it like this and take up the scale really high, you can see what we have. Now we have a night sky with a lot of stars, and everything looks nice. And this works even better than like using a Voronoi, because you can get similar thing with Voronoi, but you have more flexibility here since you can control everything. And if you want to control how much you go between 0 and 1, you can also put in a multiply here. So that means that you then can control the size better, and also the difference between the x and y, because you can also put in a multiply here after the white noise texture. So if we put in a multiply and say that it's 0, then this will always be 0, so it will be no difference. But if we put in like 0.5, we put in half of the difference here. So if I go down a bit, you can see how it works. So I can take this one, Shift D, and put it in here, and I can do multiply, and I can do a multiply here as well. See if we find the right noodle. So we put it in like here, and now you can see if I put, we can take down the scale a bit so it's easier to see. So, and take down this as well. So here we have something. And if I put these two values to 0, so I write 0 here, and I write 0 here, then you can see that it's straight lines all over the place. If I put them to 1 and put them to 1, we get the difference in x and y direction. So by controlling this, you can control the strength, but you should never go over 1, because then we get into the same trouble with cutting here. But everything between 0 and 1 works fine. And you can of course do the same with the size that we had upstairs. So if you just put it in a multiply in the same way here, but here you need to subtract with 1. So here it will look like this. Multiply a value like this, and then put in like a subtract of that value in here. It will be the same thing. And then put that value in here. So if you put that to 0, then you can see that everything have the same size. And if I put it to 1, you can see that we get different types of size here. So this is how you control it. So with the multiply, you have even more flexibility here. Okay, so I think that was all that you need to know to make this. So hopefully you learned something today as well. And I just do as usual, I say bye for now and see you later.